Okay, we're ready to go then? Okay, great. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Do we have minutes that we're supposed to be looking at?
In the
Probably
packet?
online.
Yes, Madam
Online.
Chair, there are minutes in the packet, and I would
Okay.
like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and next we have a PowerPoint, I guess? Or are we talking about CEO compensation?
Well, we have a PowerPoint. Julie, you can.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning,
Good
Brad.
morning.
Missing our vice chair, Ms. Driscoll, but otherwise, thank you for being here and welcome Commissioner Cox to the Personnel Committee. Yay.
Yay.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for inviting me.
So the rest of the committee met just fairly recently, right before the holiday,
Yes.
to kick off the annual process, the great process of doing my performance evaluation, which I'm grateful that we had 12, I think, 12 board members complete, which is pretty good. And I'm grateful for that. My PowerPoint will just kind of walk through the actions that I'm recommending that you take today to recommend to the board next week for this, and it's based on the discussions that we had at the December Personnel Committee. But this is the summary slide that we presented last month, and for you, Commissioner Cox. The process we're going through is a new process at PSA. We came up with this process to make it, to break out the compensation for all employees between the two colors of buckets on my screen. Market, which is the discussion that the PSTA board has often had about, well, are we paying our CEO comparable to other transit CEOs around the state or country? Your job compared to others, are we paying people equitably the right compensation? And that's basically done based on surveys, and then we make an annual budget adjustment across the board. And then separate, which is really the action item for today, is the little red box for merit. No matter, let's assume everyone's paid appropriately, did they have merit? Did they do a great job? Or did they not do a good job? Next slide. I can't control it. Next, there we go. So the process we've gone through is just that. First, we have calculated the market rate for the CEO position. We did a survey of the industry, and the midpoint that we set for the CEO job at PSDA is $242,900. All positions have a midpoint. And then the goal, what we tried to do for the market rate this past year in the fall, was get all employees up to at least 95% of the midpoint set for their grade. Get them to 95% of that number. Or for the lower level employees, we got them up to 100%. But for managers and above, to try to get them to 95 with a cap of $10,000 max. That if they were so far under the midpoint that it would be more than $10,000 to get them up to the midpoint, we just gave them a $10,000 adjustment. And we did that for about 60% of the employees at PSDA did get some kind of market adjustment. I would say about 4 or 5 or 6 maybe got the 10,000, hit the $10,000 cap. Back in the fall, basically, I treated myself completely different, followed a different process, and I, just for sort of optics' sake, set my market adjustment to below everybody else's, to just 89% of that 242 midpoint. When we met in December, I was grateful to the Personnel Committee for saying, well, why did you do that, Brad? We want you to be treated just like everybody else. So we ask you to go back and recompute the market rate following the same process that all the other employees did. So I did that. Next slide. So instead of the arbitrary 89%, now to be consistent with all the other employees, try to get the CEO position up to 95%. To do that would be more than 10,000, so I would hit the $10,000 cap. So it's the market adjustment is just the straight 10,000, bringing my salary up to 222, and then retroactively back on October 1, that would be adjusted by the 2% that all PSTA employees got. So that gets me to about 93% of the midpoint. Next slide. So what the action today, or the recommendation that you're going to make to the PSTA board, is based on merit. Whether I did anything or did not do anything. And gratefully, you can see by the scores that the very, very positive response, and I'm grateful for that. And the process that we did for all employees on that is, if their combined scores, meaning their scorecard, which we present to the executive committee and to the PSTA board, that drives our organization, plus their manager's evaluation, and in my case, the board's evaluation, is greater than 95, then the person was eligible for 1.5%. Trish Collins, our HR director, told me that 83% of PSTA employees got the 1.5. 83% so far. I'm happy that my score ended up being a 97.4, so I exceeded 95. So that would bring my salary to 229,882 with the 1.5%. So next slide. Last slide. Oh, this is a little chart that just kind of walks what I just went through kind of bit by bit. Thank you, Debbie, for suggesting it. Next slide. So again, the moving forward now, I'm suggesting that we have our next meeting of the Personnel Committee meeting probably sometime in August. This way, the Personnel Committee can make recommendations for the CEO position and all the PSTA employees before the budget is approved on any other market rate adjustments we might want to do, or we can do, and then the merit amounts that we include in the budget moving forward. That way, the Personnel Committee is making a recommendation on the CEO market rate adjustment, if any, before it happens, rather than right now, because it's kind of retro. Then on September 30th, we would institute. My goal would be that this coming budget year, we get there, either try to get everybody, all the employees up to 100% of midpoint. That would be ideal, but I think that might be too costly. But at least to 95 would be my goal. There's still a handful of folks that will be less than 95%. And then perhaps a 2% adjustment that we include in the budget for across the board, and then maybe another 1.5% for merit. Now, all that's subject to change based on the budget development process. But that the Personnel Committee would kind of review all that in August. Next slide. So I laid out some recommendations that you can make to the board. First, that the Personnel Committee would recommend making a market adjustment consistent with all other administrative employees. Second, that you would recommend, based on the evaluation, the 1.5% merit adjustment, like all other employees. And then the third recommendation is to meet again in August to review the 23 market adjustments, but I don't think that has to be a vote. I think that is it. Any questions or thoughts?
So the 4 to 6 people who would have qualified for a greater adjustment, aside from yourself, those are administrative or management people?
Yeah. Yes.
And how much less, well, what is my question? Was there a big difference between the 10,000 and what they would have qualified for in any case?
Pretty far? Yeah, I can think.
So was there 1.5% increases that were merit-based that helped to bring those people up closer?
Okay. And in any case, we'd be looking at them next year anyway. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, my thought is to try to clean all that up, at least to 90, so that everyone gets to 95 by next September 30th.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Yes.
So, thank you. Thank you for taking our thoughts and implementing those. I agree with what you're looking at. I struggle with a $10,000 cap. I mean, part of the goal is to make sure that pay keeps quality employees. And so I prefer generally a universal approach to those things, and if they've earned it, they've earned it. But I also understand that, the budgetary constraints and an incremental approach to that, so we can get there. But I want to make sure that that is what we're consistent with for next year, is getting everyone to where they're supposed to be. Question about the midpoints. We're going to review those. We're going to sample other agencies every year, or every 3 years, 5 years?
Every 3 years.
Okay. So that's something to keep in mind, though, is those midpoints, and we've talked about this, those midpoints are moving away and getting larger also. So as we're trying to catch up to the midpoint itself each year by policies at other agencies are also moving away. So when we talk about the inflation adjustments that agencies might experience, we might not actually be catching up to our midpoint. So we might need to be a little bit more proactive in our thoughts on how that's going to grow, so that 3 years from now we don't find that we're still right where we are. We're just behind the midpoint. We're constantly trying to catch up.
Right, well, and to that point, the consultant that did the survey for us this past year recommended, and we're working on that, it is to, based on inflation, which is very high right now, adjust your whole chart up, adjust all the midpoints up. So we were looking at maybe adjusting all the midpoints up by 3%. That does have the effect, like you just said. Now suddenly everyone that we pegged at 95 is now dropped back down to like 92, 93 of the inflated midpoints. Yeah.
And that's an appropriate way to at least do that, as opposed to going back and doing the study every year, is to adjust those. I just want to make sure that we're not constantly playing catch up. I mean, there's going to be small adjustments, but we don't want to get into this period where people are fine, and then over the next 3 years they get worse comparatively, and then they catch up again, and then they fall behind, and then they catch up again. We'd like to have a consistent policy towards doing that. So I appreciate taking a look at that. The other thing, I remember Personnel Committee in the past also reviewed other aspects of the CEO compensation, like insurance, deferred comp, severance, all that sort of. So there hasn't been any And I apologize, it occurred to me after the last meeting, and then I forgot. So,
I'll put that in the packet for the board.
okay.
Okay.
The complete list. There's no changes that I know of to anything else. The same health insurance. No car allowance. I'm at 6 weeks vacation. Same.
But
Understood, I just wanna
I
make,
got a free transit pass from PSDA.
I'd like to get one of those. No, so,
You have one, actually.
If you leave
I
the
still pay.
board, you get that lifetime pass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So I just want to make sure those other aspects that we normally see and we are just included in the overall package. But what you presented here, I think, does an earnest job of taking into account what we brought up at the last meeting about moving and treating all employees, yourself included, fairly, and using the same sort of metrics. So I'm in favor of what's presented here.
Me too. I think it's good that we're building in the market increases as we go, so we're not so far behind next year. So your benefits are comparable. Did the consultant look at benefits for other
They
CEOs?
did, yeah.
And yours are comparable, or?
Overall, I think their recommendation, their thought was our benefits are fairly comparable. What I remember they said our benefits are closer to the average than our pay
Oh,
for a lot of
okay.
jobs, But, yeah, so, they felt very comfortable with that. Yeah, the one thing I've asked Trish to do, to also kind of check to make sure we kind of keep up, is, not that it's a perfect sense of the market, but it must be kind of, for new hires, what percentage are we able to bring them in at? Our guidance to managers when they're hiring an employee is to try to negotiate them to 95 to 100% midpoint, around there. So she's going to start tracking, go back to October 1 to start tracking all the new employees that we've hired, what we're averaging.
Okay, good.
If we're having to bring everyone at 110%, then we know that we're way off.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of skews it for the people that have been here, so, yeah, that would be good information to know.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brad. And my question, the way we determine the midpoint is comparable Florida transit agencies, is that correct? Or how do we?
Yeah, well, it was broader than that. It was comparable Florida agencies, so it was Orlando, Lynx, Hart, Jacksonville,
Right,
I think Broward County, and then I remember Nashville, the Nashville Transit System was about the same size.
okay,
And then also Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, St. Petersburg, Tampa, as for other jobs.
okay.
They
So
might have
it was
coverage.
pretty broad then?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
I just have one comment, Josh, most of the questions you had answered mine. But Debbie, I really like the chart that you did here, that you added to the PowerPoint. I think that really explains it. And I think it's important that moving forward that you continue to do this because the city of Oldsmar is now getting ready to do this for our employees. And it's important that we keep, our pay structure with the market. And I just want to say great job, and I support this 100%.
Yeah. And congratulations on the scores that you got there. That's
Yeah,
quite,
very nice.
that's impressive. And we'll just,
Get a motion?
is it normal for 3 out of 15 to not fill out the evaluation?
Yes,
That seems
actually, this was pretty good this
Pretty-
year.
Oh, really?
We've had,
Was it really?
we've had more in the past that have not submitted, so it was pretty good.
Well, I think part of it also is that we switched the timing. In the past, it used to be a little bit later, right? It was
Oh, yeah,
in the
we
year,
had
so
new
so
people
we had
then.
brand new people, and so we had a lot
Oh,
more
that's
people that had
true.
no experience. So here, by changing the calendar, we were able to capture more folks that have actually worked with Brad for a period of time.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, I'm ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the CEO evaluation compensation recommendations.
And I'll second that, and with the caveat also that we put in, when the full board votes, that we put in your benefits package there too. so
Yeah.
they're aware of that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you,
And
thank you.
I think that was
Well deserved, Brad, well
all of our
deserved.
business.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm glad you did that. We should have mentioned it to Jeff Gallo. He's one of the, I didn't realize that he.
Good morning. Is
Yeah.
this meeting adjourned?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Good job, madam.
Good job.
I think that was the fastest meeting ever.
It was awesome.
Hey, stick around, man.
I forget how to do my password. I'll look it up when I go home.
Market analysis, looking at pay, does it also take into account area costs? Right, so the cost of living and operating in different areas are also growing at different rates.
Right.
No.
So, right, as an employee, you're looking, one, at what you can make, but then you're also looking at what does it cost to live there?
I got a nice one.
I don't remember that they did that. I mean,
There's gonna be, in the next several years, there's gonna be a lot of
You own
diversity
that?
I know my church.
in areas.
Oh, so that's what you're cutting
Where, I
along
mean,
with?
right, Tampa's like the fastest
Well,
growing housing market. I already know of three
Well,
St. Pete
it's not that,
employees that are moving to
grass
Newport
isn't really growing now.
because they can't afford
Ours
to
does.
compete anymore.
Because I keep it real high.
And
so that's happening here. A lot of people are moving
Now-
to Manatee.
Of course, I had the argument with them, like, so you're gonna pay
Our
transportation costs.
congregation is very.
And your time, right, if you take your hourly rate of,
Which I like, I know, I like that.
you make $15 an hour to
Oh,
take
no, I got
2
it.
hours a day to
I-
drive,
Yeah, that's.
$45 a day,
Yeah.
put that into your decision,
On
but,
contracts and stuff like that. I
it
get
occurs
phone
to me that
calls
also as we
all
do
the
those
time.
comparatives, and other places start to look at their
Yeah,
costs of living,
Class.
that there's going to be a lot of
I
changes
agree.
in these.
There was
It's not
a-
as linear as it was over the past several years.
There was
You
a.
know where
there's
they're
a-
coming
there's
in?
a,
Yeah, that's why
like
I'm having a guy plug all the vents.
thing called the Shared Use Mobility Center out of Chicago
But it is what it is.
that,
We're
that
like in
worked
a
with,
area.
what's it called,
got a
MLS,
new roof.
the Realtors database, and they did that. They created like a GPS thing, and you know when you look at different houses for sale, and then
Hi, Ken.
transportation costs, you typed in where you worked, and then they gave you
I am at.
like there's all sorts of
Why
things
don't
like you can
just
do
knock on the door and she'll come down.
utilities, how much utilities for a different house. People are
Thank you for everything.
Zillowing around
Look
looking for
forward
a
to seeing
house
you
to
guys
buy.
again.
They just look at the price of the house.
Well, that, yeah.
And this was a really
Anyways,
best one I've seen
they
that
left a
actually showed that
little hole,
transportation
little hole.
like
Put a new roof on.
way far away from